Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. It's week 2 of our 6-part Touchstone series. We're exploring the revelation of wholeness, body, mind, and soul. And each week I'm going to take, we're going to spend 2 weeks on body, 2 on mind, 2 on soul. The first of those 2 weeks, we'll talk about the spiritual principles that undergird our belief in our wholeness. And the second week, we're going to explore how we connect to it and live it, how we make choices and actions that will reflect our spiritual understanding and demonstrate, manifest wholeness in body, in mind, and soul. A friend of mine who has also made her transition a few years back, in my church in Dallas, Cynthia, she was in ministerial school with me, a wonderful, wonderful soul. And when our minister there would sometimes give a sermon that, I don't know, got a little personal, like maybe she'd been reading my mail or something, Cynthia's response would always be, "Preacher, you done quit preaching and gone on to meddling." If I hit any wound today, please know that that's not my intention. And also remember, I didn't install that trigger, But I am going to be talking pretty clearly and pretty directly about the choices we make in relationship to our body. Do we really live as though we are one with God in the choices and the actions we take in regards to our body? But before we get too heavy, I have a joke. This comes from, one of our members just supplies me with these quick little quips from the internet. I love this one. These come from signs outside of churches. This one came from St. Joseph's Catholic. "I don't know why some people change churches. What difference does it make which one you don't go to?" And I like this one too. This is from a Baptist church. "God needs spiritual fruits, not religious nuts." Isn't that great? And I like that because fruit, what bears fruit in our lives? There's a metaphysical term, demonstrate, that our consciousness, that which we are holding to in mind, that which we believe, that which we know and embody in consciousness, must demonstrate, must manifest, must express. And so, this was bad news for me when I first got to this teaching because my life was a wreck. And I didn't want to claim any responsibility for it. It was what other people had done to me, what the world was doing to me, the opportunities that were being denied to me. That's the consciousness I came into this teaching 30 years ago with. And so when the minister, the one who had quit preaching and gone to meddling, when she told me that I'm responsible for my experience, I didn't like it. I did not like to hear it. But this movement from victim consciousness to the knowing that God lives within us. When Jesus said, people are looking for the kingdom of heaven, they're saying, look here, look there. No, behold, the kingdom is within you. That we already are gifted with innate access to spiritual power. This is the truth of who we are. This is what our teaching centers on. That we're not waiting for a distant God to give us something good if we do good. What we're seeking to do is align our own consciousness with the eternal truth of being. And there is only one being. The life of God is the only thing in town, and we're a part of it. And if we can just get our mind opened to a deeper truth of wholeness, we will live lives of greater wholeness, body, mind, and soul. So this was the birthplace of our teaching in the 1890s, 1880s, even a little bit before that with Phineas Quimby, who he was one of the first people in America who spoke about spiritual healing through mental awareness. and of the body. And he was a healer. And one of the people that healed in his teaching and his ministry was Mary Baker Eddy, who went on to found the Christian Science. And then there were several other teachers that came from his own direct teaching, but it was really one of Mary Baker Eddy's proteges, Emma Curtis Hopkins, who broke with Mary Baker Eddy, because when Mary said, "I'm the final revelation," Emma said, "Not so fast, Mary." If God is infinite, if divine creative intelligence can transform us, why would God limit itself to just one book? And so Emma began to teach others, including Myrtle and Charles Fillmore, the founders of Unity, including Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, including Nona Brooks and Melinda Kramer, the founders of divine science, and many other independent teachers in our movement, which is called New Thought. For years, I was 10, 15 years in the movement, I thought it was called New Thought because it's kind of new. You know, it's only been around since the 19th century, where most religions have had a little bit longer track record. But what it really means is that hold a new thought, demonstrate a new experience. And so we gather on Sunday morning and in classes like the great class that Jean Marie's about to teach, Foundations of Unity, so that we can have a new thought about ourselves. And so then we can experience and express a different reality of our lives. So last week I talked about one of our co-founders, Myrtle Fillmore, and her experience of healing her body of tuberculosis through this practice of knowing a deeper truth of her wholeness. Charles Fillmore, her husband, our co-founder, he says this: "Man's bodily condition depends upon his state of mind. No two persons the same age are in exactly the same bodily condition." And what he's pointing us to is that what we think shows up in our body. Now, I want to be careful here. We share this reality sphere with a lot of other things and ideas and little germs and viruses, and so we're not one of those churches that says, if you're sick, you did it. Sometimes the consciousness of my experience just bumps up against something that I didn't cause or call into my experience. It's just there. It's part of being human. Recently, I saw a video. Do y'all know Abraham Hicks? It's this entity that gets channeled by, used to be Jerry and Esther Hicks. Now Jerry has gone on, but Esther. And at the end of their sessions, people will come up and ask a question. And this guy walked up to the microphone. He said, "I've asked like 4 people whether or not I should ask Abraham this question. They've all told me no, so I'm going to ask it." And he said, "The question I have is, why does a dog continue to hold its head outside the window of a moving car when it knows it's going to get bugs in its eyes?" And Abraham, speaking through Esther, said, "We have been waiting for someone to ask this question for decades. This is the most profound question imaginable." The dog knows that it's worth it to risk the bugs in the eyes, to have the exhilaration of the movement, to have its head outside the window. And then Esther said, "And that's what each of you did before you incarnated as a human being." There's going to be some bugs in your eyes in this human experience. There are going to be some doctor's diagnoses. There are going to be some great losses and tragedies. There are going to be some setbacks. This is human experience. But when we get in touch with the truth, the ride makes it all worthwhile. The freedom that begins to become our experience as we get hip to who we really are in God. Then the bugs in the eyes go, yeah, so what? There's one teacher once said this thing about, when people say, well, under the circumstances, I'm doing okay. Under the circumstances, what are you doing under there? What are you doing under the circumstances? Get to the truth. Remind yourself of who you are. And when we do this, and it, in my experience, is a process. I'm going to say it again. I am a very quick study, except about anything that matters. Then those lessons are long for me. They take decades. But here's what I'm discovering, that those lessons that have taken me decades to know and embody, they last. The changes that come are lasting. So Jesus, one of the healing stories, the miracle stories that have been brought down to us through the Christian Bible, he entered into Jerusalem by the pool of Bethesda, and there was an invalid there, a man who was paralyzed, and he was on a mat, and Jesus went up to him and said, What's up? And the guy said, well, an angel comes down and troubles the water, and the first one in gets the prize, and I've never been able to get in there. I don't have anybody to help me get in the water, so here I am 38 years later. Jesus was like, good story. How many of us have stories like that? Here are the circumstances, and here's why I can't have what I would really like to have in my life. But then Jesus has two statements that come to us in the story. And I like to say about these Bible stories, this comes from the Native American tradition with their great stories. The storyteller would rise and say, I don't know if any of this happened, but I know it's all true. Jesus said, would you be made whole? Do you want to be different? Do you want to have an experience of strength and power and freedom in your life? And I think there must have been something about the energy of that question from Jesus that it sparked a deep knowing in that man. And he said, yes. So the next statement, Jesus said, rise up and walk. Metaphysically, what this means for us is that if we're really willing to stand in the truth of our wholeness, we must be willing to rise up from the conditions of which we have been in bondage and move in a new evolutionary path, revealing more of our truth. We got to do something different. The old wisdom, I first heard it in the recovery world, was nothing changes, nothing changes. And the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. If there's a pattern of that in your life and you would like things to be different, you have to rise up. Say, I am more than this. And then to begin to take up different actions and choices. So the title for today's message is actually Health, Healing, and Wholeness, but I've kind of switched it up a little bit. I'm talking about wholeness right now. And now I'm going to talk about health, which is the demonstration of our wholeness in the human body. And then I want to talk about healing last. So let's move on to health. Health is the demonstration of spiritual cause in our body. When we are living the spiritual principle of wholeness, it demonstrates in our body as health. Now, that does not mean that there won't be bugs in the eye. And this does not mean that someone whose body is differently abled is not exhibiting wholeness. It does not mean that someone who has a diagnosis of a terminal illness is not exhibiting wholeness. But what we do is to know that the presence of God is here within me. God is, I am. God is love, I am love. God is light, I am love. Say this after me. God is wholeness, I am wholeness. This is the principle upon which we're building this teaching. As I said, the responsibility piece, the law of attraction does not give us what we want. It gives us what we are. So if we are to demonstrate health in our body, we must begin to think and choose and act like a healthy person does. See, I'm still looking for the shortcut. But like I said, those things, I'm good at those. But it's the actual transformational work that comes in consciousness and in practice over years. Actually, I'm pretty good at that too. It just takes some time. That if we are to demonstrate health, we must be willing to be a healthy person. So there's a book I'd like to bring up the cover for you. Many of you may already know this. It's a bestseller right now. It's called Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity by Dr. Peter Attia. He lives in Austin. His whole premise is this, what he calls Medicine 2.0, which is about diagnosing and treating illness. It's given us an additional 10 years on our lifespan. But for many people, that additional decade is horrible. They do not have good quality of life or freedom. And his whole message is, how can we prevent illness? How can we prolong our health? He calls it health span. That what we want is not necessarily longer lifespan. We want longer health span. This book has really inspired me. And I'm continuing to work with it. And we'll see. My feeling right now is that so many of my health choices in the past have been motivated by vanity and shame. And I'm beginning to make choices based from a different place. From knowledge, from all of this is medically researched, and also from the innate wholeness that I am. So I just want to share with you the findings. This is sort of my takeaways from his book. There are 5 of them that have inspired me. Exercise is the fountain of youth. Sorry. If you want to demonstrate freedom and ability and health in your life, you have to find some way to exercise. Now, what he says is, it's always going to take more time than you have, so you just have to decide how much time you're willing to give it. And anything you do, if it's 10 minutes a week, will be better than nothing. But if you're willing to give it 3 hours, 4 hours, he has wonderful, wonderful information on the kinds of exercise we should be doing and how it will enable us to have a longer health span. Nutrition. I mentioned vanity, right? I've struggled with the same 30, 40 pounds my entire adult life. And so, as I mentioned, wanting to be motivated by vanity, I've tried every diet invented by humankind. All of them. Low fat, low carb, all of them. I've done the intermittent fasting. I've done them all, trying to get down to a place where I think I look cute. And what I'm learning now is that, I knew this before the book. These bodies evolved over millions of years. And our ancestors, the way that they were able to survive and for our species to succeed was that we were able to take excess calories and store them. So those of our pre-human whatever that were not able to store fat, they all died in famine and times of scarcity. But our great-great-great-great-grandparents, they learned how to save it away for a rainy day. And understanding that food was scarce in those days, so it was important, and that's what our brains take up a lot of energy, so we need to be able to find energy, and so in times of stress, we seek for salty, fatty, sweet foods because they have a lot of calories. Anybody else can relate to that? These bodies are evolved in a different time than the times we currently find ourselves because salty, fatty, sweet foods are $1.25 at the get-and-go. They have boxes of them with colorful wrappings. And so what Peter Attia says is that most of us are now overnourished. That almost sounds healthy. I'm not fat, I'm just overnourished. Like I'm being so good to myself, I'm too good to myself. So my second takeaway is that we need some way to stay mindful about how much we're eating and what kind of foods. He says really it doesn't matter what plan you use, but you got to have some sort of consciousness around it. And here's the deal. It's not as important as exercise. I thought that it was more important. He says it's really not. You can carry a few extra pounds, and as long as you don't get the fat around the organs internally, you're really okay. So being a little fluffy is not the worst thing in the world. But when you're single and you're trying to date. Anyway. The third is sleep. We need 7 to 8 hours of sleep as adults. He says this, that if evolution is so good about choosing for success, if this were not important, then I believe evolution would have developed somewhere in the animal kingdom some species that don't need to sleep at all. But it's very important for brain health and for physical health. 7 to 8 hours of sleep is recommended. So sleep is way more important than I thought it was. So I'm working on my sleep hygiene now. And the last two, relationships. The quality of our relationships is incredibly impactful upon our physical health. We need people, and we have to invest in people. We have to be there for people so they can be there for us when we need them. That's really the whole reason why we're still open at Unity of Houston, is to build a container where friendships can be born and grow and nurtured over time. The spirit groups where we have gathered people together in 6 or 8 just so that they can make friends who are also on a spiritual path, who are also trying to tap into the truth of their wholeness so they can demonstrate a life of their dreams. We need each other. And the last is mental and emotional health. We're just now beginning to understand how important this is and how increasingly difficult it is in the times we find ourselves living in, of isolation and technology. So I believe that's where we want to get to. We must begin to act more as a healthy person. It leads me to my final point, which is around healing. So when I read a book like Peter's book, I am used to cramming for the test and then acing it the next day. So I had good grades because I knew how to do that. This is the way my brain works. I can just short-term memory anything. I never went to class in American history in college and I got an A on the final. That's just the way I did it. It has not served me well in many ways. So what I'm coming to understand about healing our relationship to our wholeness in our body has more to do with self-compassion than acing the test. It has more to do with accepting our humanity and loving it as it is than it has to do with eating all the perfect foods and getting the perfect amount of exercise and sleep. Those things are important. So as I mentioned, most of my relationship with my own body temple has been fraught, to say the least, has been filled with rejection and shame. And I'm changing that story now. I'm changing that story that I want to be able to live my life in 20 and even 30 years from now with freedom. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to pick up children of my nieces and nephews and hopefully even my grandchild, who knows. I want to be able to have this experience of engaging in life as long as I'm here. And so I'm committing to this path to the best of my ability. But I'm not going to ace the test every time. And what do I do in those moments? I must find some capacity to give myself compassion. If you know the work of Kristen Neff from UT Austin, that's her whole game, is like comparing self-esteem to self-compassion. Self-esteem actually is not such a great thing, we found out. It creates a lot of negative things internally in the psyche and in the culture. We're experiencing the greatest wave of narcissism ever in American culture. And Christine Neff's research shows that that probably has to do with the fact that the last couple of generations we've emphasized self-esteem so highly. And when we're not feeling self-esteem, we must find someone that I can be better than. And so some of this training around self-esteem may even be behind some of the bullying we're seeing. So we've got to find a different way to be with ourselves. And self-compassion is her work and her research. And there are 3 hallmarks of self-compassion: self-kindness versus self-judgment, seeing our common humanity instead of our isolation. You see, instead of comparing myself to somebody else and finding myself better or worse, if I can find the commonality, we're all here doing the best we can do. And the third is mindfulness versus over-identification. See, we suffer, but then we don't know we're suffering because we're trying so hard to be better than, worse than, less than, all of those things, the self-talk that we've been doing. And if we could just be with what is, even when it's painful, to just be with it. And then offer ourselves tenderness and compassion. This is the way forward. I'm 2 minutes past time, but I've got a couple more things to say, if you're willing to hear me. This week, it is demonstrated in my life. I've been trying to get cardio, and I'm out, and it's cooler now, so I can get out and walk the trails and the parks, and I'm going along Buffalo Bayou Park yesterday morning, and I went 6.25 miles fast. I'm doing it. I'm committed to it. I'm feeling good. And there was oh my gosh, so many beautiful people with beautiful bodies in this city. It's really annoying. They're young, They're just, 0% body fat, and they look so happy when they're speeding past me. But here's what I've noticed, that in the past, when I would see someone like that, almost always I would compare and despair. That's what I should have, but this is what I do have. This is not, and have that negative self-talk. But you know what? I've been sharing for a while now, for a couple of years, my mantra is, my job is to love this body as it ages. And there are two sides to that. It is to give it what it needs for health. That's loving our bodies as they are. But it's also accepting the little quirks and folds and flaps and all that we have. Accepting it. It's just, isn't it cool? This is the way my body is. So yesterday morning, seeing all these beautiful people, what I thought was, I'm glad I'm out here. I'm out here doing it with you, fast, pretty people. I'm doing it. I'm doing it too. I'm doing it. And I'm not going to ace the test. But I want to be in the game as long as I can. Will you pray with me now? In this moment, we connect to that life within us that is seeking to reveal itself as our wholeness. Loving ourselves, loving our bodies as they are, and making choices from that love and compassion. Choices to live as a healthy person lives. To choose good and nutritious food, to move our bodies in the way that we can and that improves and grows our strength and flexibility. Committing to being there for one another, to grow community and friendship, to being there for ourselves, for our emotional and mental health. Resting when we're tired, dancing when we're happy. What a beautiful gift this human life is. So we give thanks for our bodies. I invite everyone within the sound of my voice to just put your arms around your own body and just say, thank you, God, for this gift. Thank you, God, for this gift, for all that it is and isn't. This body is the holy temple of the Holy Spirit. And I'm grateful to be here now. So I speak a word of health, healing, and wholeness over every person here, that we may rise in this truth of the innate well-being of who we are in God, and we may move forth and evolve to continue to grow and gain greater and greater freedom. We are here, we are free, we are healthy, we are whole, and so it is. Amen. If no one has told you today that you're gorgeous, that you're here for a holy purpose, you are. And if no one has told you today that they love you, I love you. God bless you. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.